Greetings, welcome to the Metal Book Tavern, and today I have an interesting video idea. So, there are a lot of books that I read and loved, and I kept them on my shelves, and you can see these books. However, there are quite a lot of books that I did not finish for multiple different reasons. Of course, there are many books that I did not finish, but I have only selected 15 of these for this video. Maybe I'll do a part 2, I don't know, but still. So this is the video list of 15 books that I didn't finish. So let's get started. So the first book that I tried reading multiple times, but failed and eventually gave away is The 13th Tale by Diana Satterfield. The premise sounded interesting. It's about a young woman who is hired by an infamous writer to write a sort of an autobiography, to write sort of biography for the writer. That's what I remember, but I tried getting into the 13th Tale and I failed. Wasn't able to finish this. Probably maybe because I felt the main character was kinda way too soft or something, I don't know, but I tried the 13th Tale and that book isn't for me, sorry. Now the next book would make a lot of fans of the series angry. I don't include the series in this list, but only if I finished a few books and I haven't continued. Well, just like The Witcher, because I read the first 5 books and I did not start reading the 6th one. In this series, however, I began reading the 6th book and I quit. And that's The Song of Susanna by Stephen King. This is the 6th novel in the Dark Tower series. I already mentioned, I already said a lot. I already talked a lot about the Dark Tower in my previous videos. You can check that one out. I can say that I liked the first 5 books, but I had no desire of continuing. I froze. I thought I would go back to the Dark Tower, and I never did. I don't know when I'm going to do that. If I'm going to do that, I don't know. Sorry. If you are interested in my words about the Dark Tower series, you can check out my previous videos. And now I'd like to move on. The third book on the list is also by Stephen King, but I own it, I keep it, and that's Cujo. Well, I didn't finish the story, probably because I knew one huge spoiler prior to reading the book, and I didn't want to read that scene. And I couldn't stand the mother of Ted, because she was an awful character as far as I remember. I had a few pages left of the novel and I just couldn't finish it because I felt so dried out. I don't think I'm going to ever reread this or even finish. I don't know. This edition also has The Cycle of the Werewolf and I haven't read it. I don't know if I will. Book number 4 I own, but it isn't mine. I borrowed it from my aunt. I really wanted to get into this author. I read his infamous novel, and that's Humiliated and Insulted by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I think in English it's the other way around. It's Insulted and Humiliated. I don't know. Either way, in Russian it's Humiliated and Insulted. I remember reading this book back in 2018. I found this in my aunt's house and I began reading it, and I went half through the book, but I stopped for some reason. I think I need a new edition of the book because this is an old Soviet edition and I like myself some modern editions. Well, you can see on my bookshelves that I have a lot of modern editions. But the story seemed interesting and I liked it much more than Crime and Punishment. This one I do want to start over. Okay, there are a lot of books that I didn't finish, but I won't either continue or start over. I think I'll need a separate video for that. Book number 5 is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I found that book in the library, just like 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but I tried reading Jane Austen and I kinda got bored with it. Not my author, I guess, because the book number 6, the next book, is also by Jane Austen, and that's Emma. But this one was a hard read for me. At least Pride and Prejudice was quite easy to read. I know that Jane Austen is recognized as classic, that everyone loves and so on, but that's not the author for me, and I got quite bored reading her books. I think there are way too long conversations in her books that were not very interesting to me, and so she's not my author, sorry. Moving on. Book number 7 is Night Music by Jojo Moyes. This one actually had a very interesting premise. It's about a house and a few people who fight for said house. Sounds interesting, right? But I got bored in the first 100 pages. I liked a few things I read in the book, but I stopped, and there were more interesting books for me, and I never went back to Night Music. Okay, so book number 8 is an interesting one. I bought it in 2017 for in order to back in the day I searched for a book that would help me improve my English skills, because back then I did not read in English that much, even though I had books in English, and that's A Girl in Exile by Ismail Kadare. I was really interested in reading that book, but I felt so dull. But first of all, back in the day, the book was very hard for me. My English level wasn't as high as it is now, and it did not help me improve my English skills. I felt like the book was very dry, it was very boring, and it was something that didn't seem like it. And then so the book that I thought would help me improve my English skills turned out to be a translated novel. Nothing against the translated novels into English, but I'd rather read a book that is originally written in English to improve my English skills. And then the plot lost me, and then there were more interesting books to read. I remember back in March 2021, I thought I'd read that book, but then I also had The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, and it's obvious which book won. I was like, I'm not interested in A Girl in Exile anymore, because I tried to get into it and I feel so dull, so I eventually gave it away. I'm not saying that the novel is bad per se, but I remember nothing, well, almost nothing from it, and The Wise Man's Fear took my attention. Book number 9 I also don't own anymore, and that's Unseen Academicals by Terry Pratchett. Unseen Academicals. So I tried reading Unseen Academicals, and it seemed to be fun, but the more I read, the more I got tired from the book. For some reason, it didn't seem to be the book for me. Then I found out that this is a part of the series and it's not the first one. I do remember some things from the book, but it did not impress me that much. I found myself forcing myself to read that book, and I stopped. Then I bought myself soul music, and I tried reading that, forced myself, but at least I finished that one, and it didn't do much for me. I gave both of these books away. I don't own them now. Book number 10 is It by Stephen King. I read 400 something pages of this book. Okay, so I first watched the Tim Curry adaptation in 2015, and I got interested in source material, and there were also at the time were news of making the new adaptation, which I watched at the cinema, I remember. I got myself it, and I thought I'd read this, despite its despite it being 1,000 something pages, and I failed. I did not bring myself to continue the novel. Maybe that was because at the time I was very much afraid of books like this. They were so big. I don't know when I'm going to finish this. I'm not going to start over, I think. I'd rather continue where I stopped. But I'd like to do so, because after reading the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, I'm not afraid of 1,000-something books anymore. Well, I also have Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, the 4th book of Wheel of Time Ahead, and so far it's the biggest book in the series that I own. Well, it's still smaller than the Stormlight Archive. Well, it's still smaller than your average The Stormlight Archive book. Now when I look at it, I'd definitely love to continue it. I thought of putting the book on my lowest shelves, but now I reconsidered that. Book number 11 is Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky, also known as the Strugatsky brothers. This was my first book by them. I heard a lot about them and I definitely wanted to read some of their books, and I still want to. But the Roadside Picnic, I tried reading and it felt so dry, and I didn't understand what was going on. I remember trying rereading some of the pages, but I still did not understand what was going on. I didn't feel any sympathy for the characters, and I quit the book when I had only 40 pages left, because I bought The Children of Húrin by J.R.R. Tolkien at the same time as Roadside Picnic, and I eventually picked up The Children of Húrin, and it turned out to be one of the best reads of 2021. But I still intend to continue the Strugatsky brothers. I think I should read It's Hard to Be a God, that's the Russian title, or Monday Starts at Saturday. I decided to be unapologetic about quitting books and moving on to others, because I want to invest my time and energy into books that excite me. I'm not sorry about quitting Roadside Picnic. Book number 12 is also a hard one for me. It's Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. I tried reading that book many times, even back when I was still at school. I thought I found myself something like Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev, aka a Russian literature book that is exciting for me. But I tried reading that book and it didn't work out for me. Tried, I literally forced myself. But the opening pages are iconic. I doubt you'd forget the Anushka razlila masla, aka Anushka has split the oil. I don't know how it's in English. That's something you would remember after reading this. I don't know if I'm going to start over. I gave away my copy, but in fairness, that copy had a very small font and I didn't like it either. Maybe I should replace the edition and maybe then start over someday. Book number 13 is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I tried reading that book first in English because I went to the bookstore and saw the English version, began reading, and then I went home and I continued reading it in Russian because I went online and found the Russian version, continued where I stopped, and you know what? It seems to be quite a good novel. It seems to be a quite good sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. However, The Handmaid's Tale is so good, it's absolutely iconic, and I decided that it doesn't need a sequel, regardless of whether that sequel has a positive ending or negative or neutral, doesn't matter. I decided not to continue the Handmaid's. I decided not to continue the Testaments. Sure, I am aware of all the plot twists. I know what happens, but I decided not to read that because The Handmaid's Tale is iconic and I want it to remain standalone for me. So I'm not reading that. I'm not finishing Testaments. Book number 14 is the same case as The Dark Tower. It's the case when I read when I began reading one of the last books and I stopped there. It's mostly Harmless by Douglas Adams. This is the 5th and final book of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. This edition contains books 3, 4 and 5. I remember when I began reading book 5, or maybe it was in the middle of book 4, I don't remember, and I did not finish. I don't actually remember whether it's book 4 or book 5, but I decided to point out book 5. I liked the first one, but as I continued reading the series, I felt like I was losing interest more and more. Now when I went through a few pages, I think maybe I should start the series over. I don't know. But before I picked up the book today, prior to the filming, I thought I'm not planning of reading the series, but I intend to keep them on my bookshelves, on the lowest bookshelves. I don't know, maybe I will someday reread the series and start over, but not a nearby future. And finally, 15th and the last book for now. I'm a little bit disappointed in this book. I really expected more of it, and that's Mick Wall, and that's When Giants Walk the Earth by Mick Wall. This is a Led Zeppelin biography. What can I say about it? I absolutely love rock and metal biographies. I pick biographies based on my interest in the star itself, I mean in bands themselves. I'm familiar with Led Zeppelin, as I'm familiar with Led Zeppelin's music, and I thought it would be a good idea to read When Giants Walk the Earth, especially given that Led Zeppelin was one of those rock and roll lifestyles type of bands. I already mentioned earlier that it's a good thing that rock and roll lifestyle isn't glorified that much anymore. It should not be, but nonetheless it's interesting to read about such lifestyle, and this is why I picked up the book, and it was very dry. And it doesn't help that at the time of reading the book I had a very serious reading slump. It was back in spring 2022. I did not bring myself to read anything. It was a strong reading slump. I didn't want to read. I didn't have the energy. But I did force myself to continue reading this, and I found that I was losing interest, and I stopped at page 430. I have around 100 pages left, and I don't know whether I want to continue or not. So far this is the only rock and metal biography I'm kinda disappointed in. No, don't get me wrong, I love rock and metal biographies, and I can't say that this book sucks or that is very disappointing, but it is a little bit disappointing for me personally. Well, if you are a die-hard Led Zeppelin fan and you are after facts, this one is for you, but when I go into rock and metal biography, I expect something more dynamic. Well, this author, Mick Wall, also had written Metallica biography, and it's much more fresh. It focuses on the personalities of the band members and the events that happened and how things go on and the songs and things like that. I think I will do a video about rock and metal biographies at some point. When I have read the 2 biographies I have at home, 2 more that I have at home. And that's all, at least for now. I think I should do part 2, but including the books that I actually intend to continue. Well, for example, I intend to continue Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery and Stranger in a Stranger Land by Robert Heinlein. No, yeah, I know that Stranger in a Stranger Land sounds like the title of I know that The Stranger in a Stranger Land sounds like it has inspired the song of the same name by Iron Maiden, but as far as I know, these 2 are not connected. And one honorable mention before I finish, I began reading online Other Land by Ted Williams. Anyway, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. What are the books that you did not finish? Let me know down in the comments. See you next time. Goodbye.